back to Words of Paradise. I'm your host, Leon Idle, and I thought we all came to the conclusion many moons ago that video game adaptations to, live action were bad. Not only in movies, even though we have obvious examples like Assassin's Creed, the Resident Evil films, Blood Rain, etc., etc., but also in TV when we had Netflix's Resident Evil, which was Resident Evil in name only and should have been called CW drama that craps all over the source material, or when we had Halo and they were more obsessed with showing us Master Chief's cheeks and, of course, breaking cardinal rule number one, taking his helmet off and showing us his face. That ended up being a bait and switch. So even not video game, live action adaptations always seem to fail. Think about Cowboy Bebop, which took a very stylized anime and tried to do with that in live action. Proving once and for all, they absolutely cannot. So, all in all, you would think they would realize, man, this is a bad idea, let's give up on it. But no, because now they're doing it with The Last of Us, when, Last of Us has already gotten its 3 strikes, in my opinion. At least with this article being what I assume will be the 3rd strike. Strike number 1 was when the showrunner said, oh, you're going to care more about the characters dying in our TV show because they're not just pixels on the screen. Completely denigrating and disregarding the medium in which the game started. Guys, video games have been cinematic since, 2013 or something. The storytelling and the emotional, just emotional places they can take you. You were completely throwing the medium under the bus when you disregard that just by saying, oh, it's just pixels. Yeah, well, yours are just actors. It's still not real. What does it being live action have to do, when these are so close to live action anyway? So yeah, that was strike number 1, disregarding the original medium, showing you don't care. Strike number 2, which I covered in a short, they straight up told the actor that plays Ellie, hey, don't pay attention to the source material, don't watch gameplay, don't play the game, because, you don't need any of that to play the character, to the point where the actress watched it in secret. So not only do they think that, oh, live action's more superior than video gaming, that's dumb kid stuff, but now they're telling the actress, hey, don't even pay attention to the source material. This is an adaptation. You have to know what you're adapting. I'm gonna make a Spider-Man movie, and I'm gonna tell the guy passes Peter Parker, never watch any other Spider-Man movie and never read a Spider-Man comic. You're gonna go in completely blind. Who cares if we adapt the character right? So yeah, that was strike number 2. And now we're at strike number 3, or at least what I assume will be strike 3. Why HBO's Last of Us makes one major change to the video game story. Why are we making major changes to the story? Do you not respect the source material? Let's read and find out. The Last of Us video game is deeply steeped in the year of its release. From the moment the player hits start, they become Sarah, a young girl in 2013, as she looks for her dad Joel and Uncle Tommy while the zombie apocalypse starts with a bang, quite literally, outside. After the game's prologue comes to its heart-wrenching finale. Yeah, see, even this calls it heart-wrenching. The game knows how to be heart-wrenching, even though it's a video game. We don't care that they're pixels, it's heart-wrenching. The action jumps 2 decades into the future with the story of Joel and wisecracking teen Ellie's trek across a post-apocalyptic America in the 2030s. So when HBO set out to adapt The Last of Us into a live-action series 10 years later, the studio faced a dilemma. Keep the original timeline, or more the entire plot forward by... Keep the original timeline, or more the entire... or more the entire plot? That's supposed to probably say move. Or move the entire plot forward by a decade. Instead, co-creators Greg Mazin, Chernobyl, oh, well that's not a good sign, Chernobyl was awful, and Neil Cuckman, am I right, the original game's director, chose a third option, push the prologue to the past. People are going to say, oh, well as long as Neil Druckmann's okay with it, then that's fine, because he's the original creator. Maybe. Who knows how much input he has? Frankly, he should have 0 input after the, travesty that was The Last of Us 2, but we'll get to that in a little bit. I have this thing about jumping into the future, Craig Mazin says at a roundtable interview attended by Inverse. I feel like if I'm watching this show in the year is 2023 and the show takes place in 2043, it's just a little less real. What? A little less real? Bro, it's a TV show. None of it's real to begin with. Yeah. You hear Squawkbox here? Hondo's agreeing. That is stupid. Yeah, 2040, it's a TV show. It is not real regardless. Just because a show is in the future, or if you watch a show set in the 1800s, is that less real because it's not set in modern times? You don't need a show to be set in the modern day to be real. even if I'm watching a show in 2023 and it takes place in 2016, it's a little less real. Yeah, it takes place in 2016 in the past. So you are insinuating it. I get it. You probably just worded something terribly, but you know what? I'm going to take it at face value. So if you word something like this, then that's how we have to take it. We have to take it at face value. So even something in the past, just 8 or so years in the past, 7 or so years in the past, that's unreal to you. That's ridiculous. Like, that anything you make, if you make it in the year, like if you set it in the year that you are creating it in, the moment you start to include real world aspects, you're dating it anyway. It's going to be dated. That's why Gotham as a show, despite how much I don't care for it, works so well. They have tube TVs, flip phones, cars from the 50s, an 1800s Gothic aesthetic. You don't know what time period it's set in, and by the showrunner's own admission, they did that on purpose because it makes the show seem timeless, and I think that's brilliant. Now, the show itself, not that great, but that's neither here nor there. The solution, instead of moving the prologue forward a decade so it takes place in 2023, was moved back to 2003. This means the majority of the story, the part where there's the distant future in the game, is now set in our present. Sort of. I thought it might be interesting just to say, hey, look in this parallel universe. This is happening right now. This is happening this year, Mazin says. But why? How is that interesting? All you're doing is showing us our world in a post-apocalyptic setting. There's nothing interesting about that. There's nothing disinteresting either. It's just a fictional setting. Like, I don't see what that's going to add aside from changes to the source material that are, frankly, unnecessary. But don't expect to see references to Bitcoin or TikTok as a result. Much like how culture in the game's story froze in 2013, the culture in the HBO show froze in 2003. Okay, so if the culture froze in 2013 and it takes place in 2043, why not still have it take place in 2023 or in 2013 and the show take place in 2043? If the culture is going to be a culture we've already experienced and it froze, then why does it matter? Like, this literally makes no sense as to why they decided to take this route. Especially if you're not going to use things like Bitcoin and TikTok, which I agree. I'm glad you're not going to use that. Those things wouldn't have come about during, you know, a zombie apocalypse. But then you also probably can't put in any other agenda-based rhetoric like these shows are wont to do. You can't, you know, if this is going to act like time started in 2000 or stopped in 2003, then you better use the F word a whole lot. And I'm not talking about the one that starts, I'm not talking about fuck. I'm talking about the one that gay people don't like, because that word was perfectly okay in 2003. So if you're going to act like time stopped then, you better make sure that you're not using any progressive agendas that came, you know, that came into place in, you know, 2014, 2016, things like that, because according to you, time and society stopped. Characters listen to music on old Walkman players, explore malls full of very 2003 merchandise, and dress like people in the post-apocalyptic episode of Friday Night Lights. But just because the show's main story is now set in the present, it's not really a topical pandemic show. I mean, thank God for that. We really didn't want to make a show about COVID-19, Neil Druckmann says in the same interview, noting development of the show began before the outbreak in 2020. Oh, the outbreak in quotes, like it's so scary. We wanted to make something that's more universal than that. Spanish flu was a big influence as far as how it affected people, how people died, how they became very segregated, how they became xenophobic in their towns. Alright, okay. There's another big element of the time involved with the series. Unlike in the original game, HBO's The Last of Us has a vast array of material to refer to. There's the original game, the DLC Left Behind, and the sequel, The Last of Us Part 2. Seeding Ellie's growth into the character we see in Part 2 was a priority for Mason. Of course it was. Never mind the fact that that game is crap, that story is crap, but that's what you really want to do. You're going to speed run the first game to get to the second one where it's got a bunch of political messages. Like, we all know that's coming, even despite the fact that it was universally panned. There are moments that are there because of what we know, he says. One of the things that was important was for us to make sure that if we did well enough to earn time on television and tell more story. Where Ellie goes should feel true to where she is now, even if she's changed and different. You feel like, yeah, I can see the evolution. I can see why she went there. Well, I doubt that you guys had the skill and the writing to be able to do that, because even the games failed to do that, and you're not going to get better than that. But the main way the real world affected the world of The Last of Us is the sheer space allotted by the television format. A video game is beholden to the player stepping into the shoes of a character. Oh my... Back to strike one. they're literally denigrating and disregarding the medium. They're making the medium of video games seem like a less powerful medium. Like, oh, television's so much better. Video games are the highest grossing source of entertainment in the world. They make more money than movies. They make more money than TV shows. You are really picking the wrong battle when you want to start talking trash on video games as a medium. Do you hear how upset he is getting? This is just driving you crazy, isn't it, Hondo? In The Last of Us case, there's briefly Sarah, then Joel, and then briefly Ellie. Adapting the game into the series allows for there to be scenes with either of the protagonists present, allowing for them to flesh out characters we've only seen briefly in the game. For Druckmann, creating a show gave him the chance to finally use plot lines he developed that didn't work in the game. In conversation, I'd say, I actually wrote the backstory for this character that ties back to Joel and Ellie. He's like the story, and Craig's eyes would light up, and he'd be like, oh my god, we gotta get that in the show, he says. Look, I don't believe that. I'll be honest. I don't believe that you just, oh, you had this plot line and we couldn't make it work in the game. Like, maybe it's true. You know, some things have to be cut for time, but this is the first we're hearing of it, even though this game has been out since like 2013. No, I'm not buying it. You're pulling a J.K. Rowling and you're changing canon after the fact and acting like it was part of this big master plan. The character was given a new life and backstory. You'll just have to tune into The Last of Us to find out. It may start in the past, but it's definitely a story for now. The Last of Us premieres January 15th. You know what? No. Nuh-uh. I will not be watching this show. I have HBO Max. I will actively go out of my way to avoid this show and make sure they don't get the clicks. I'm not going to watch it to review it. I'm not going to try and hate watch it. I'm just going to ignore it, and hopefully it fails, because this is what you deserve when you disrespect source material and when you disrespect fans who love a medium. This isn't being made for fans of the medium, because they're actively going out of their way in multiple interviews now to trash gaming and to say, hey, our version is going to be better because we can do more, when that's inherently false. You can do far more in video games. Video games are like animation. You can do far more in video games and animation than you can with live action, just because there's far less limitations than TV and live action acting give you. It's so basic. How they don't get this is beyond me. But, you know, they just want to be stuck on their high horse. They think they've got some sort of moral high ground, and they think that they're these great Shakespearean writers that can do better than one of the most acclaimed stories in all of gaming history. So, all in all, don't support this. I highly, highly recommend you just completely pass on this, and maybe if you already have an HBO subscription, just watch Dune again and prepare for the sequel, Dune Part 2. That's going to be a better use of your time. But maybe you disagree, maybe you have another way to look at this, and if so, let me know in the comments below, or hit me up on Twitter and tell me there, @BoltTheWord. But until next time, please like and subscribe. I'm really trying to grow this channel in 2023, so it would mean the world to me. Hopefully we'll get more information on The Last of Us and how awful it is soon. Talk to you next time on Words of Paradise.